This point of time, I would like to invite my good friend, Ianchulev from Newark Pioneer. He's in the midst of interview for his fellowship program, which they are having. So I would like to invite Sean to give us a live presentation. Sean? So Sean
Thank you, Venkatesh.
Serial innovator who doesn't need an introduction, but still some of his products you're going to see, and he'll definitely remind of the great person, how great he is.
Thank you. I'm always humbled, by the way, every time I come to one of those conferences or as I visit. And again, it's a pleasure to be here and really see some new technologies and new approaches. I'm humbled always at what's happening at Aravind, which I think is a place where we don't really think about necessarily process and service innovation, but there is so much process and service innovation. We as doctors often talk about different technologies and gadgets and devices, which kind of we are leaning towards naturally as clinicians. But service innovation is so impactful, and we just heard a little bit about that. So Venkatesh, thank you for inviting me. And for me, that's always a great learning experience from my Indian colleagues, things that we can learn here in the US in terms of being able to maximize throughput and deliver high quality care with efficiency. And we know this is becoming a lot more pertinent. So today, I'm going to take 15 minutes to talk about what I call innovation and the new wave of doctors, innovation doctors. And again, there has been some shifts in how we do medicine and how we deliver population health, with a lot more attention on population health, where today we're at a very interesting juncture. We can really impact this using innovative, accessible technologies. So I'll tell you about my path so far and some of the devices and technologies I've worked on over the last couple of decades. And Venkatesh, you've been part of that since the very beginning when I was a resident. So it goes way back. So here are my disclosures. And I think about innovation, I understood over time that we're very similar to some of our blind patients. When we start innovation or a process of discovering a new solution, we start out in the dark. We open a door and it's pitch black. We are asking questions, we're groping in the dark, and slowly we see little lights. We see some flashes that if we maintain our perseverance, if we use our grit to continue to pursue that, despite all the bumps and despite all of the challenges along the way, we're creating something new and we're discovering something new. So that's the beautiful part of the innovation. Now, today, I think there is a lot of need for innovation. When I look at this, it's 2020, and we just saw the World Health Organization report on blindness. And again, it's hard to believe that there's 1 billion people in the world with moderate visual disability. We have 94 million with cataracts when we have a 3 or 4 minute solution. I know probably in Aravind, it's a 2.5 minute solution. So, and we have 8 million with glaucoma. I mean, we're talking millions populations that currently have problems with visual disability. At the same time, we talk a lot about cancer and heart attack, but studies have shown when you ask people what they fear most, again, if you look at where blindness is, it's up there with paralysis. People do fear heart attacks, 6% of them. 14% of people do fear cancer. But if you think about their worst fear, 20% or more fear paralysis and blindness. And again, in terms of what we invest in innovation compared to cancer and some other specialties, it's really good to think about that, because I don't think we get the fair share of the commitments from governments and from institutions to tackle that problem. So I have been involved in a number of innovative projects, and I think we're going to talk about incremental innovation, but I have been lucky and unlucky to get involved in what I call categorical innovation, things that open up not just an improvement or an incremental change on an existing technology. I've been drawn to projects that somehow end up being quite different and open up a new chapter, such as one of my very first technologies when I was a Genentech, and led the clinical development of Lucentis. And that was one categorical innovation where we remember almost 20 years ago, there were no intravitreal injections. And now we do this on a regular basis. Then subsequent to that, I was involved with a technology called Aura and intraoperative barometry, where I invented a new way of intraoperative biometry for cataract surgery. And we'll talk about that. And again, that was quite different in terms of looking at what we can do for high definition cataract surgery. Subsequent to that, I was involved in a technology called the CyPass and MIGS, and we know the entire MIGS space really dramatically changed. Today, I'm working on some new technologies, and I'll tell you a little bit about, and I'll also show you a technology on robotics that I'm going to present at the AAO in the Spotlight Innovation at Glaucoma for the first glaucoma robotic surgical system that has never been unveiled. So in fact, we're going to share it with you before we share it at the AAO. And so I'll talk a little bit about Eyenovia and how we deliver drugs and why we need better delivery technology of drugs. You're very familiar, and we've talked about it about the MyLoop before, and non-phaco-based fragmentation. And then we'll talk a little bit about robotics. So obviously, Lucentis is one of the innovations I was involved in. We started out when intravitreal injections were almost none, except for an endophthalmitis. And suddenly, over time, we were able to show that we can turn the course of that disease, and with the Marina and Anchor studies, to really change the paradigm, not only for AMD, but for RVO and diabetic retinopathy. Subsequently, when I really started thinking about cataract surgery and how do we determine the power of the implant, we had about 50 years of IOL power calculations that were very, very, very incremental, right, with the different formulas. But they still had a major problem, which is that we had a very high rate of residual refractive error, which in the 2000 was more than 30% greater than 0.5 diopter. And where are we today? We've actually reduced that to less than 5%. And when I looked at how we do this, we realized that incremental innovation was great, but it was a very slow curve and it plateaued. So we really needed to have a better technology, a different curve that can catch up and then surpass the traditional curve of preoperative biometry. And that was the intraoperative biometry. And we studied that as a resident. You can see on the left using the intraoperative autorefractor, because we didn't have millions of dollars to actually build the machine, which eventually turned out to be the Aura, and is something that we use here very commonly in the US now, particularly for the premium cases. And again, it was very, very pleasing to know that there were more than 2 million patients now who had received intraoperative barometry, as reported by Alcon, which bought the technology. I was involved in also leading the development of a technology called the CyPass, and really the next wave of innovation in glaucoma, because we know tube and trap have been around for 50 years, but there was very little new innovation. And so MIGS came around, and we spent about $100 million in 10 years developing the CyPass supraciliary stent, which was a very elegant approach. It got approved by the FDA. And again, just like in innovation, sometimes you bump along the way and you stumble. We did find that in this case, even though the stent was doing beautiful in terms of efficacy, we did have some patients that had endothelial cell loss. So that was withdrawn from the market. As painful as that can be, but really it helped in the whole MIGS space to drive innovation forward. So the technologies of tomorrow, what am I working on today? And one of the things is a big problem, and you are very familiar with this intuitively, because we know we spend so much money and effort to get patients to use eye drops. And this is a patient of mine that was headed for surgery, trabeculectomy, because her pressure wasn't controlled. And that was about 10 years ago. I asked her, well, let me see how you're putting your drops, because she said she was putting her drops correctly. But when she demonstrated, and we don't ever do that because we don't have time, but when she told me and she showed me how she was doing her drops, you can see that all of them were not in the eye. So we have most patients, when we say take a drop a day of this medication, they don't get it. They don't get it into their eyes correctly. And we know if you don't give the drop to the eye, you're not going to get the effect. So how can we change that? Well, we've developed an inkjet printer for the eye called the OptiJet that delivers the horizontal printing of the drug. It's basically a piezo print technology, and is able to print the micro droplets to the eye without high impact. So patients only feel a little wetness. So that's basically a directional mist, very similar to what's in your inkjet printers when you do a pixel by pixel printing of ink. We're using the same very technology to print eye drops to the eye in a horizontal way, very fast, in less than 80 milliseconds, which beats the blink. So before a patient can initiate a blink reflex, the drops are in the eye, and it has a targeted mechanism. And we have now multiple phase 3 programs that are in development. And I call that part of the rubric of really high precision smart technology. And not only that, but Inovia is also developing a way, the device actually has smart Bluetooth capabilities. So it actually records every time the patient presses the button and goes to the cloud. So when your patient comes home or comes to the doctor, you know what their compliance rate is. You know if they're 10% compliance or 90%. So this is some new innovation. We're actually having programs in progressive myopia for the kids with atropine. We have programs now in presbyopia with pilocarpine to remove the reading glasses. And we have programs with other pharmaceuticals. The more recent project I've been involved, actually I call it a pandemic project, I'm presenting at the AO on that, is about robotics. And in robotics, we're able to increase the precision with robotic assisted devices about 20 times, not 20%, 20 times. I'm sure all of us are great surgeons here, and even in the best of hands, our precision and resolution is about 100 microns. And with the robot, we can actually go down to single-digit micron level precision. You can cannulate retinal vessels, you can cannulate Schlemm canal. So what we did at New York Eye and Ear at the 200th anniversary, we actually installed the first clinical robotic system in the US and only the second in the world, where I've been working with the Dutch team of Precise. And now that system is CE marked for retina surgery. But we developed during the pandemic here at Ground Zero in New York, we developed the first surgical robotic system for MIGS and for glaucoma. And what you're seeing here is the first robotic assisted goniotomy. We also have now the first robotic assisted trabecular microstent placement. We know that 30 to 40% of those microstents are not in the right place. So I'm very excited to present that at the AAO and actually to share it with you before that. One of the other projects, and Venkatesh knows about that we're working on, is really Vision Without Boundaries, which is basically back to the future where the doctor is making a phone call, a call to their patient, but making it on their smart device. And that's Keep Your Sight. During COVID, the number of telehealth visits increased from 134,000 in the US to 10 million. And telehealth is here to stay. And now we have beautiful abilities to reach to patients on their smart devices. And so we built a platform with Keep Your Sight for digital health and digital devices that allow you to do virtual perimetry to check vision, to do macular function testing and ocular photography and external motility testing, all on the smartphone technology without hardware. And this is very important because when you remove the hardware, and if we digitize many of the devices we can, then we can deploy them anywhere, anytime, without the need to ship anything and without the need of expensive technology. And it becomes exponentially scalable, which is great, and which is what in a lot of your projects in Arabian you guys have done so wonderfully. So when it comes to innovation, I've learned a couple of things that I wanted to share my top 7. First is for medical innovation, trust your clinical instincts and intuition. Number 2, follow through and pressure test your concepts until the lid blows off. People are very protective initially. They don't want to share their idea. And again, that's a problem, because if you and your idea in the garage and you don't pressure test it with other people that actually are out there and can give you some advice, you can go down a rabbit hole. Collaborate to innovate. And what I call it, it takes a tribe, not a garage and not a village. It takes a tribe to go out with the machetes and really find the problems. Surround yourself with best-in-class people, and that's very obvious. Embrace critique and discard criticism. They're very different. Critique is one, criticism is another, and making the difference between them is very important. Then calculate your risks, because you don't want to ignore some significant risks, and try to get multiple bites at the apple. What that means is have a backup plan. And then don't latch on to friendly advice. And I'm going to finish off here, because some of the worst advice I've gotten is the friendliest of advice from the best of friends with the best of intentions. And I call it the best way to predict the future is to invent it and create it, from Abe Lincoln. But here it is, starting from my pre-med advisor days when I was an immigrant in the US. And it's very hard to go into medical school if you're an immigrant. And one of my pre-med advisors told me, as a foreigner, it's impossible to get into medical school. Have you considered dentistry or veterinary medicine? And she was trying to help me, which was true. Well, this is actually about a couple of months ago with the Dean of Harvard Medical School, Dean Daly, who visited me at Inovia, and I finished Harvard Medical School. And we were talking about innovation, and we were talking about how to even innovate around the new medical curriculum that I'm helping with that as well, because Harvard is also thinking, how can we change the way we train doctors in this new reality? And I've gotten many bad pieces of advice from great people and great friends, including one of my preceptors before I went to do Lucentis. Hey, nothing new in retina and AMD treatment. It's not a happening field, because at that time we had only scleral buckles, and it's true. Look at what happened in a couple of years. Another person who told me it's never possible to work and do intraoperative aberrometry. Don't waste your time, with all best intentions to help me not waste my time. So again, as you think about that, all of these are people that want to help you in one way or the other. But again, don't forget what their perspective is. Even they may have the best intentions. It's up to you to take the difficult road and to grope in the blindness or to grope in the darkness until you find what your path is, and until you innovate, because it starts with a little glimmer of lights that we see and most other people don't see, because they're not looking for them. And they may tell you this place is dark, it's a cold cave, you can't see anything, you're going to break your neck, and they're probably right most of the time. But obviously, we need to pressure test the ideas, calculate our approach as we innovate, because it's a treacherous place where most of the time you fail, and in success is a repetition of failures. So I know all of that is very familiar to all of you. I just wanted to share the things I learned the hard way and the things that apply now as we innovate and we try to move the bar on other technologies like robotics, high precision, smart delivery of medications, MyLoop. We're going to come with some new technology around microinterventional glaucoma. I cannot talk about now, but again, it's really great to be an innovator or an eye doc with an eye, where we not only take care of vision problems, but we innovate around them. So thank you very much. Hope I didn't go over too much, Venkatesh, and it's a pleasure to be here and to be part of that panel.